Morning light streamed through the windows of a cozy, two-story house on a tree-lined street in a quiet neighborhood near Asheville, North Carolina. It was a crisp spring morning, the air still fresh before the warmth of the day set in. "Mom, I'm heading to the library to borrow some new dinosaur books." Lillian Carter, busy preparing breakfast in the kitchen, turned around at the sound of her son Ethan's voice. His bright green eyes sparkled behind his glasses, his face lit up with excitement. He looked just like his father, Daniel. Even now, 8 years after the accident, a familiar ache stirred in her chest every morning. But Ethan's smile, that same warm, boundless energy, had kept her going all these years. "Don't make any stops on your way back," she reminded gently. "I promise. But can I borrow 2 dinosaur books this time?" "Of course," she said with a small smile, "but only after you finish your homework." Ethan nodded, his expression suddenly serious, as if sealing a solemn pact. His careful, thoughtful nature would have made his father so proud. On the kitchen counter, his prized dinosaur figures stood in a neat row, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, his father's last Christmas present, holding a special place among them. On the living room wall hung a photograph of Lillian's mother, Eleanor, in her crisp nursing uniform. Next to it, her sister Vanessa's framed CPA certification, a symbol of pride for the family, though Vanessa had returned home 7 months ago, newly divorced and now expecting a child with another man. "Lillian, you're always working," Eleanor sighed at breakfast. "You know we could help more with Ethan as a family." Her mother's disapproving frown had grown more pronounced in recent months, despite Lillian carrying 80% of the $2,500 monthly mortgage while single-handedly raising Ethan. She sipped her tea in silence. Since Vanessa's return, their mother's attitude had shifted, always critical, always finding fault. At the brunch table, their mother discussed Vanessa's divorce as though it were some unfortunate event entirely out of her control. "That man was no good," she'd say with a shake of her head. But Lillian knew the truth. Vanessa's spending habits had drained their finances long before the marriage collapsed. "You know," Vanessa mused one afternoon, peering into Ethan's room, her designer maternity dress barely hinting at her pregnancy. "This space gets such great natural light. It would make the perfect nursery." Lillian stiffened. Vanessa's gaze swept the room like a real estate agent surveying a property, her expensive handbag draped over one shoulder. "This house has too much clutter," their mother added. "Maybe we should have a garage sale?" Vanessa's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea. I really don't need all these old things." Lillian's stomach twisted, but with a major real estate contract on the line, she couldn't afford to argue. She had spent months negotiating a luxury housing development deal near Biltmore Village, a contract that could define her career. When the deal finally closed, she received a long-awaited bonus. With that, she planned a 3-day trip to Disney World for Ethan. She wanted to give him something special, memories that would fill the spaces where his father's presence should have been. "Make some good memories," Vanessa said sweetly the night before their departure. "Have a nice time," their mother chimed in, her voice unusually warm. Almost eager. Lillian brushed the thought away. The night before they left, Ethan's room seemed strangely neat. Too neat. But she was exhausted, and with a big trip ahead, she dismissed the unease as paranoia. 3 days later, after a whirlwind of Disney magic and Florida sunshine, they returned home. The taxi wound through Asheville's winding roads as twilight settled in, the last rays of the sun casting golden light over the Blue Ridge Mountains. "I can't wait to see my dinosaur figures from Dad." Ethan bubbled excitedly from the back seat, clutching the Stegosaurus he'd picked out at Disney. "I'm going to put him next to my T-Rex." Lillian smiled, feeling a sense of peace. These past 3 days had been filled with laughter, adventure, and pure joy, just what they both needed. But as they pulled into the driveway, something felt off. And when Ethan rushed inside to his room, his excited voice suddenly fell silent. Lillian followed, her heart hammering as she stepped through the doorway. Ethan's room was empty, completely stripped. The bed, the bookshelves, the dinosaur figures gone. Everything that had made it his space, his sanctuary, had vanished. The only thing left behind was a single folded note on the floor. She picked it up, her hands trembling. "Don't be mad," Vanessa had written in looping cursive. "I needed the space for the baby. You understand, right?" A cold, sinking dread filled Lillian's chest. Ethan turned to her, confusion in his wide green eyes. "Mom, where's my stuff?" Lillian inhaled sharply, rage and disbelief flooding her veins. She had been so focused on work, on securing their future, that she hadn't seen this coming. But she saw it now, and she would never let it happen again. The joy of her son's smile made everything worth it. "Yes," Lillian said softly, "but only after we unpack our bags." "I know. I'll clean my room before I put it on display," Ethan said excitedly, holding his new Stegosaurus figurine close. As the taxi turned into their residential neighborhood, the familiar tree-lined street came into view. But something felt off. An unfamiliar SUV was parked in front of their house, and on the porch sat a brand-new luxury stroller. "Is that one of Aunt Vanessa's friends visiting?" Ethan asked innocently. Lillian didn't answer. A strange, sinking feeling settled in her stomach. As they stepped out of the taxi, she found herself gripping Ethan's hand a little tighter. When they opened the front door, the house was eerily silent. No background hum of the TV, no sound of Vanessa's chatter, no familiar creak of her mother moving about the house. Just silence. Unnatural, deliberate silence. "Mom, something smells weird." Ethan wrinkled his nose. He was right. The usual scent of their home, the warmth of old books, the lingering trace of vanilla from her morning coffee, was gone. Instead, the sharp, chemical scent of fresh paint mixed with an unfamiliar powdery aroma filled the air. The distinct smell of baby products. Lillian's unease deepened as they climbed the stairs. The setting sun cast a golden glow down the hallway, but to her, it looked almost red, like a warning. "Mom, I want to go to my room," Ethan said, pulling at her hand. "I want to see my T-Rex." His small fingers trembled slightly. The moment her hand touched the doorknob, Lillian knew. Something irreversible had happened. She turned the knob and pushed the door open. Ethan's room was gone. The walls, once painted his favorite shade of deep blue, had been replaced with a soft, pale pink. A state-of-the-art crib sat by the window, pristine white with delicate detailing. A changing table lined with luxury baby products stood neatly stocked. Shelves that once held Ethan's dinosaur books and action figures now displayed stuffed animals, their price tags still dangling. His belongings had vanished. Everything. Ethan's breath hitched. His wide green eyes darted around the unfamiliar space. "Where's Dad's dinosaur?" His voice shook. "Where's my stuff?" A voice behind them broke the heavy silence. "Oh, you're back early." Lillian turned. Vanessa stood in the hallway, her manicured hand resting on her stomach. She was dressed in designer maternity wear, her makeup flawless, looking as though she had just stepped out of a fashion catalog. Behind her, Eleanor, their mother, lingered, looking uneasy but not remorseful. "Where are my son's things?" Lillian asked, her voice eerily calm even to her own ears. Vanessa beamed. "Oh, I took over the room. Sold everything. Got a good price, too." She sounded almost proud. Lillian's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. "Your sister is pregnant," Eleanor chimed in, forcing a small laugh. "It's only natural, isn't it? What about the dinosaur?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Dad's dinosaur? It was his last present." Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that old toy? I sold everything to a second-hand shop. It wouldn't suit this lovely nursery anyway." She let out a light, carefree laugh, as if she had just tossed out an old magazine rather than a child's treasured belongings. Ethan's body trembled. He clung to Lillian's side, his small frame shaking with silent grief. "Come on, Ethan. Don't be upset. Look." Vanessa plucked a brand new teddy bear from the shelf. "I got you this one instead. Isn't it much cuter?" Lillian stepped forward, her voice like steel. "Don't touch him." The room fell silent. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Vanessa scoffed. Oh, don't be so dramatic. She rolled her eyes. It's just some old stuff, Lillian. You're calling the police on family? Eleanor asked, her voice tinged with disappointment, as if Lillian was the one who had crossed the line. This ends here, Lillian said, her voice quiet but firm. She turned away, holding Ethan tightly as she guided him down the stairs. Behind them, she could still hear Vanessa and Eleanor laughing, a cold, empty sound, as if they were spectators to someone else's misfortune. In the car, Ethan sniffled, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom, what are we gonna do? Dad's dinosaur. Lillian pulled him close, pressing a kiss to his temple. I promise, she said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. We'll get it back. Determination stronger than ever before, Lillian knew this was no longer just a family dispute. It was the beginning of righteous retribution against an unforgivable betrayal. The fluorescent lights of the Asheville Police Department cast a harsh glow on her tired face. The station was quiet in the late hours, the occasional ring of a phone and the rhythmic clicking of a keyboard breaking the silence. Detective Serena Holt sat across from Lillian, studying her with sharp, perceptive eyes. Everything in Ethan's room was disposed of. Lillian's voice trembled slightly. His clothes, books, toys, and the dinosaur figure his father gave him before he passed. Detective Holt turned her computer screen toward Lillian. We've reviewed the security camera footage, she said. 3 days ago, a second-hand dealer's truck was parked in front of your house. The footage shows your sister and mother carrying out multiple boxes and bags. We also captured Vanessa speaking smugly with the dealer while Eleanor helped load the truck. Neither of them showed an ounce of guilt. A young officer approached, holding out a smartphone. We also checked social media, he added. The screen displayed Vanessa's Instagram account. In her latest posts, Ethan's belongings were labeled as unwanted junk. Among the items was the dinosaur figure his father had given him. Lillian's stomach twisted. Detective Holt handed over a folder. Based on the value of the stolen items, we estimate the total loss at approximately $20,000. The dinosaur figure collection, in particular, contained rare and premium pieces. Lillian nodded slowly, barely hearing the number. This wasn't about money. This was about her son's memories. About the last tangible connection he had with his father, callously thrown away as if it were meaningless. Leaving the police station, she drove downtown to one of the most prominent law firms in Asheville. On the top floor of a high-rise, she walked with unwavering steps down a marble hallway. James Porter, a well-respected attorney, scanned the documents in front of him. There's clear premeditation, he said. Based on the evidence and Vanessa's social media posts, they had been planning this for at least a month, waiting for your vacation period to strike. He laid out additional documents across his desk. We've also gathered testimonies from your neighbors. Some of them overheard Vanessa saying she had priority because she was pregnant. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was calculated. Lillian's fingers curled into fists. Next, Porter continued, we moved to financial sanctions. At the bank, Lillian initiated the process to halt payments on the family home's mortgage. Every document proving she had covered 80% of the $2,500 monthly payment for the last 7 years was on record. This is a draft of the certified letter, Porter said, sliding another document toward her. It outlines everything, how you've essentially carried the household finances while your mother and sister took advantage of your earnings. That evening, 3 police cars arrived at the house. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering among themselves. How could you do this? Eleanor wailed as officers stepped inside. Calling the police on your own family? Lillian said nothing. Do you even understand what you're doing? Vanessa shrieked. Having your pregnant sister arrested? Lillian stared at her, expression unreadable. Vanessa, for the first time, looked afraid. But there was no turning back. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was justice. This was about protecting her son's rights. That night, in the quiet of a hotel room, Lillian stroked the soft cheek of her sleeping Ethan. Tomorrow would be another battle, the legal proceedings in court. But it was a battle she was prepared to fight. I'll get Dad's keepsake back, she whispered. I promise. The heavy doors of the Buncombe County Courthouse gleamed under the morning sun. The early summer heat was already setting in, cicadas buzzing in the trees lining the courthouse steps. Lillian took a deep breath, gripping the folder of evidence Attorney Porter had prepared. Inside, they met for a final review before stepping into the courtroom. Porter flipped through the pages. With the police report, financial records, and social media evidence, we have an airtight case. Your sister's actions weren't just unethical, they were criminal. Lillian's eyes darkened. She threw away my son's memories, she said, voice steady. And she thought she'd get away with it. Porter nodded. Not today. Minutes later, court was in session. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table, her polished composure cracking as the judge reviewed the police reports. Eleanor sat beside her, looking less like a mother and more like an accomplice. As Porter laid out the evidence, the judge's face hardened. Miss Carter, the judge addressed Vanessa, you deliberately sold your nephew's personal belongings, including sentimental items of great personal value, without consent. Your social media activity shows clear premeditation, and financial records prove you had no financial stake in the household you took from. Vanessa's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, my client was under stress due to her pregnancy and acted in a way that... The judge cut him off. Stress does not justify theft, destruction of property, or exploiting a family member's absence for personal gain. Vanessa paled. Eleanor opened her mouth to speak but hesitated. The judge turned to Lillian. As the primary financial contributor to the household and the legal tenant on record, the court finds in your favor. Your sister and mother will be held liable for full restitution of the stolen items. Furthermore, we will be issuing a formal court order for the return of any recoverable property. If the missing items are not returned within the designated timeframe, further legal action may be pursued. Lillian exhaled, her grip tightening on the edge of the table. She had won. Vanessa's face crumpled in disbelief. Outside the courthouse, Lillian stepped into the sunlight, lifting her face toward the sky. Justice had been served. Now, she had one last promise to fulfill. She took out her phone and dialed the number Detective Holt had given her, the one belonging to the second-hand shop. Hello, she said. I'm looking for a dinosaur figure. It belonged to my son's father. And I need it back. A cafe near the courthouse buzzed softly with the hum of conversations and clinking silverware. Inside, shielded from the North Carolina summer heat, Lillian Carter pressed the condensation from her iced coffee against her forehead, letting the coolness momentarily soothe her. Across from her, Attorney James Porter spread a stack of papers across the table, his voice steady and confident. We have more than enough evidence. Lillian nodded, gripping her cup tighter. Social media post history, security camera footage, testimonies from neighbors, Porter continued, flipping through the pages. And most importantly, among all this, we found something shocking. He turned his laptop screen toward her. Lillian leaned in, her stomach tightening. Vanessa's direct messages, private conversations she had with second-hand dealers, dated back 3 months. Can you buy everything from my nephew's room? I want a high price. I need to get rid of it fast since we're moving. Lillian clenched her jaw. Moving? Porter scoffed. There were never any plans to move. This is clear premeditated theft. He gestured to another document. And it gets worse. We dug into Eleanor's bank statements. After Vanessa's divorce, large sums were being withdrawn monthly. Meanwhile, every record of your continued mortgage payments is in our evidence file. Lillian's hands curled into fists. She was relying on my money to fund Vanessa's lifestyle. It was a calculated betrayal. Lillian exhaled sharply, pushing the anger deep down. She had a trial to win. Back at their new home, the apartment was still cluttered with unpacked boxes, but Ethan's new room was already neatly arranged. His bookshelf was filled with new books, his desk set up, and his dinosaur collection, at least what remained of it, lined the shelves. Mom, I'm heading to school, Ethan called cheerfully. Lillian turned from the kitchen. Take care, sweetheart. As he ran out the door, his backpack bouncing slightly, she noticed something different. His shoulders seemed a little stronger. He was healing. On her way to the courthouse, her phone rang. It was Detective Holt. "We found new evidence," the detective said, excitement in her voice. Some of Ethan's belongings turned up at a second-hand dealer's warehouse, including his dinosaur figures. Lillian's breath caught. His father's last gift. There was still hope. By the time she arrived at the Buncombe County Courthouse, a crowd of reporters had already gathered outside. The case had gained local media attention, painted as a dramatic family legal battle. Woman sues pregnant sister over son's stolen memories. Lillian ignored the flashing cameras pushing through the doors. Inside the solemn courtroom, the weight of the moment settled over her. Heavy wooden furnishings, the American flag standing tall behind the judge's bench, it all exuded an air of authority. Vanessa entered moments later, draped in expensive maternity wear, her expression carefully composed. Eleanor, looking tired and drained, walked beside her. Neither spared Lillian a glance. Then, the prosecution began presenting evidence. One by one, the damning photos appeared on the courtroom screen. Security footage of Vanessa and Eleanor hauling boxes into the second-hand dealer's truck. Screenshots of Vanessa's messages proving she had planned to sell Ethan's belongings months in advance. Financial records showing Eleanor had siphoned off Lillian's mortgage contributions. And then, the most painful piece of evidence. A photo of Ethan's dinosaur figure, tagged for sale. The prosecutor's voice rang clear. The defendant didn't hesitate to sell even the last gift from her nephew's deceased father. Vanessa's lawyer tried to spin the narrative. "My client was under extreme stress due to her pregnancy," he argued. She wasn't thinking clearly. But the judge's face remained unmoved. "This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment," the prosecutor countered. "It was premeditated deception." Then came the moment that made the courtroom fall silent. "We call Ethan Carter to the stand." Lillian's heart clenched as her son climbed onto the witness chair, his small hands gripping the edge. He took a deep breath and spoke with quiet strength. "The dinosaur Dad gave me before he went to heaven, it was my treasure." The courtroom stilled. "My grandma and Aunt Vanessa took everything from my room. Even my memories of Dad." Eleanor shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Vanessa, however, smirked. That single expression changed everything. Lillian saw it, and so did the jury. No remorse. No regret. Just arrogance. A ripple of disgust passed over the jurors' faces. When court recessed, Lillian crossed paths with Vanessa in the hallway. She stopped. "Why?" Vanessa laughed softly. "You wouldn't understand." Lillian's stomach twisted. Vanessa's voice dripped with resentment. Always the perfect sister. Always playing the ideal mother. Lillian stared at her. This wasn't just greed. It was jealousy. Vanessa smirked, stroking her pregnant belly. "I have a new life. Once this baby is born, everything will be mine." Lillian's blood ran cold. That afternoon, Eleanor took the witness stand. Her voice trembled. I just wanted to help Vanessa." Lillian sat stone-faced, emotions swirling. "But you knew you were selling your grandson's belongings," the prosecutor pressed. Eleanor's eyes darted toward Vanessa, then back to the judge. She faltered. Lillian saw it then, doubt creeping in. For years, Eleanor had enabled Vanessa, letting her selfishness dictate everything. But now, faced with the harsh reality of her actions, the consequences were undeniable. The prosecutor pressed further. "You prioritized your daughter's luxury lifestyle over your grandson's well-being. Are you saying you were unaware of what you were doing?" Eleanor's lips trembled. For the first time, Lillian saw guilt. But was it enough? As court adjourned for the day, Lillian knew. Tomorrow would bring the verdict. And no matter the outcome, she and Ethan would never look back. Speechless. The courtroom was silent as Detective Serena Holt presented the final piece of evidence. The defendant sold the stolen items to multiple second-hand dealers, she stated. The total amount comes to $23,450. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's expression remained firm as the last of the evidence was examined. Lillian Carter closed her eyes, silently praying. Beside her, Ethan sat slumped in his chair, exhaustion evident on his small face. It had been a long, grueling trial. After 2 hours, the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict. As the courtroom fell into tense anticipation, the jury foreman stood. We find the defendant, Vanessa Carter, guilty of civil theft and deliberate destruction of property. We order the defendant to pay damages of $30,000 and further prohibit her from approaching the victim and her son. A hush fell over the courtroom. Lillian exhaled slowly, standing to face Vanessa and Eleanor one final time. "This is the end for us," she said quietly. Vanessa's face twisted in defiance, but there was no fight left. Eleanor simply looked away. As Lillian and Ethan stepped outside into the sunlit streets, Detective Holt caught up to them. "Mrs. Carter, I have one more report," she said with a small smile. "We were able to recover some of Ethan's dinosaur figures from the second-hand dealer. You can pick them up tomorrow." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Really?" he gasped. Lillian pulled him into a tight hug. As she gazed out at the clear Asheville sky, she realized they were free. 6 months later, morning sunlight streamed through the windows of their new home. Though the view was different from their old neighborhood, Lillian and Ethan had fully embraced this place. "Mom, look, my dinosaur room is finished." Ethan's excited voice called from upstairs. Lillian climbed the stairs and stepped into his newly decorated room. The recovered dinosaur figures stood proudly on a special shelf, the T-Rex his father had given him holding the place of honor. Stacks of new dinosaur books lined his desk, and colorful drawings Ethan had made covered the walls. "It's a beautiful room," Lillian said, gently ruffling his hair. "I'm sure Dad would love it too." Ethan beamed. Through sessions with a child psychologist, Ethan had slowly begun to heal. At first, he had nightmares, waking in the middle of the night, calling for her. But those nights were fewer now. He had made new friends. He had regained his smile. "Hey, Mom," he suddenly said, pulling a paper from his backpack. "I got 100% on my math test today." Lillian grinned as he proudly held it up. "My teacher said I did really well." She hugged him tightly. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." Meanwhile, their former home stood empty. With mortgage payments in default, the house had been foreclosed. Vanessa and Eleanor were forced to move into a trailer park on the outskirts of Asheville. One afternoon, as Lillian sat at lunch with her colleagues, the conversation naturally turned to the case. "Did you hear about Vanessa?" Jennifer, a coworker, leaned in. "She had the baby," another colleague added, lowering her voice. "But she developed postpartum depression and can't take care of it." Lillian stirred her coffee in silence. "Eleanor is raising the baby now, but it's too much for her at her age," Jennifer continued. Another coworker sighed. "She's still trying to live like she has money, always showing off luxury brands on social media. But she's stuck in that tiny trailer." Lillian said nothing. She had let them go. She had moved on. Her colleagues exchanged knowing looks. "No one in the community is helping them," Jennifer added. "Even the church groups are keeping their distance." "Karma," someone muttered. Lillian lifted her cup to her lips, saying nothing as the conversation moved on. That evening, sitting outside on the small patio of their new home, Lillian let the cool mountain breeze brush against her skin. Ethan appeared beside her. "Mom?" She turned. How are Grandma and Aunt Vanessa doing?" Lillian hesitated, then met her son's clear, honest gaze. She wouldn't lie. "They're going through a difficult time. But that's the result of their choices." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he simply said, "They're not happy like us." Lillian felt a lump rise in her throat. She drew him close, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "No," she whispered. "But we have what's truly important." Ethan nodded. "Yes," he agreed. "Dad's dinosaurs, and you, Mom." He looked up at their new home, then back at her. "This home. And good friends too." Lillian smiled, tears stinging her eyes. As they sat together, the stars twinkled above them, the cool night air wrapping around them like an embrace. No matter what had happened in the past, they had each other. And that was enough. A year later, life in the trailer park remained stagnant for Vanessa and Eleanor. Vanessa's once pristine designer clothes had lost their shine, the luxury lifestyle she had flaunted now a distant memory. Her social media presence faded, followers slipping away as her life no longer fit the glamorous image she once curated. Her child, left in daycare for long hours, never truly knew a mother's warmth. The once adoring gaze she had expected from her baby never came. Eleanor, now worn down, bore the weight of it all. Meanwhile, Lillian's new home had become a place of laughter and light. Every weekend, neighbors gathered in the backyard for barbecues, children's laughter filling the air as they played, while the adults shared stories over good food and warm company. One night, as Ethan climbed into bed, he looked up at his mother. "Mom, we're happy, aren't we?" Lillian smiled, pulling him close. "Yes, sweetheart. We have everything that truly matters." The dinosaurs on his shelf stood in the soft moonlight, more than just toys. They were memories of his father, symbols of love, resilience, and justice. And outside their window, under a clear night sky, lay a happiness that could never be broken. What would you have done in my place? Looking back, I sometimes wonder, what if I had stayed silent? What if I had accepted their betrayal, swallowed my pain, and continued living under the illusion of family loyalty? Would it have been easier? Maybe. But would it have been right? Absolutely not. Justice isn't always about winning in a courtroom. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you feel alone. It's about fighting for those who can't fight for themselves, in my case, my son, who had already lost his father. He deserved to keep his memories, his sense of security, and the home we built together. And I refuse to let anyone take that away from him. Now, I turn to you. What do you think? If you were in my shoes, would you have taken the same path? Leave a comment and let me know. What would you say to me or to Ethan? Your words mean more than you know. And more importantly, what lessons do you take from this story? If there's one thing I hope you carry with you, it's this. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for demanding what is rightfully yours. Family, love, and loyalty should be earned, not exploited. If someone in your life is taking advantage of your kindness, manipulating your generosity, or making you feel like you owe them simply because they share your blood, stand your ground. Protect your peace. Fight for what's right. And if you've ever been through something similar, share your experience. Your story could help someone else find the courage to walk away from toxic family dynamics and reclaim their happiness. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve a life where we can say, "Yes, I am truly happy."